Hey everyone, welcome to Unfiltered, the voice of truth in a confused culture. My name is Jason. I'm glad you're here today. Each week, as I say, every week, this is a space where we take a step back from all the noise and just think clearly for just a few minutes, because the truth is we're surrounded by noise all the time. There are voices everywhere trying to shape how we think, how we see the world, and how we see ourselves, and even how we respond to the people around us. And most of the time, that shaping is not it's not obvious. It usually is or does not happen all at one time. It happens slowly. Sometimes it happens quietly, a little here, a little there. Maybe it's a post that you keep seeing, or a conversation that you keep having, a thought that you keep entertaining, a fear that you keep replaying. And before you know it, something that was just in front of you now starts to get inside of you. That is why we need moments like this to step back, clear our thinking, and get around a voice that is going to be encouraging and challenging to you. Not because we're trying to escape the world, but because we need to make sure that the world is not quietly forming us without our permission. We need space to slow down, come back to the truth, and ask ourselves, what is actually shaping me right now? Last week, we talked about the battle in your mind, and we said something important. Your thoughts are not neutral. The things you think about repeatedly will eventually start to shape what you believe, and what you believe eventually begins to shape how you live. So today, I want to take this one step further. Again, we're talking about your thinking, we're talking about your mind, and the reason why is because our thoughts are important. And if they are, then we have to ask another question. Who are those thoughts coming from? Think about that. Where are your thoughts coming from? Because your thoughts or your thinking does not just appear out of nowhere. It is being shaped every single day by what you are feeding it. What are the things you're listening to? What are the things that you're watching? Because what you feed grows. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Now, that might sound simple and really almost too simple, but it is one of the truths that show up everywhere once you start paying attention to it. You'll notice it more and more. Now that I'm bringing it up, you'll be like, wow, I did not see that coming. Because if you feed fear, guess what? Your fear gets bigger and bigger. It grows. It gets stronger. If you keep giving space to that perspective, you'll keep feeding your insecurity. If it becomes easier and easier to see yourself through that lens, you're going to deal with it. But the opposite is also true. So just as much as you might think negatively, if you reverse that and you start to feed your mind with truth, guess what? That truth grows. If you feed your mind with wisdom, guess what? That wisdom grows. If you feed it with clarity, clarity grows. If you feed it with putting, or if you keep putting it, the right things in front of you, eventually they start producing something in you. Again, this is one of the biggest challenges that I see people face every single day. They're not paying attention to what they're feeding themselves. And this is where a lot of us get caught off guard. Because again, most people do not think of their daily inputs as something that they are feeding. We think we're just scrolling. We're just, think we are watching something that is mindless. We think a lot of times we're just listening to a conversation and we're killing time, right? But the truth is, those things that we're listening to, we're being fed by it. And every time you sit with a thought and let it replay over and over in your mind, you are feeding something. Every time you keep going back to the content that stirs up anxiety or a comparison or anger, lust, bitterness, or an insecurity, guess what? You are feeding something. Every time that you stay in a conversation that constantly pull you toward negativity or compromise, you are feeding something. And I know that can sound intense, right? because we like to believe most of what we think is harmless. Or we like to believe what we take in is harmless. The movies we watch, right? It's just entertainment. I'm just scrolling, but you don't realize the algorithm that starts to play. And now everything that you look on your phone is the same thing. And you say, oh, it's not that serious. And sure, right? Maybe one post is not that serious. Maybe one video or movie that you watch is not that serious. Maybe it is just that one conversation that you have that's not going to completely change your life. But the problem is, it's not rarely just one moment. The problem is those things become consistent. It's like compound interest, right? When you read, when you read the book Atomic Habits, he's talking about the compound interest that works for you instead of against you. It's the same way, because what you return to again and again, little by little, begins to train you, your focus, your emotions, and most definitely your reactions. It trains what feels normal to you. That is where you have to stop pretending that our inputs are neutral, where they don't affect you, because they do. They are not neutral. Everything is doing something. It is either moving you closer to clarity or deeper into confusion. I say it all the time. We're living in a world where we have more information than we've ever had before, but yet we are the most confused society than we've ever been before, because there are so many voices out there that we are allowing into our mind. So those voices are either strengthening what is true, or it's making compromise feel more normal. It is either helping you think clearly, or it is teaching you to live distracted. And guess what? A lot of people are frustrated with what is growing in their life, but they never stop to ask what they've been feeding themselves. They want peace, but they keep feeding themselves anxiety by the things they watch and listen to. They want confidence in who they are, but they keep feeding comparison. Facebook is the worst at this. You're looking at everybody else's fake life. They want you to see the best of them, or what they want you to believe is them. That's why I like to call it fake book. Now, not everybody's fake, okay? But a lot of people are fake on there. You want discipline, but yet you allow yourself to be fed distraction. You want a healthier mindset, but yet you keep surrounding yourself with voices that keep reinforcing the same unhealthy patterns every single day. And then you wonder why you're still stuck. Well, maybe the issue is not that nothing is changing. Maybe the issue is that something actually is growing. It is just not the thing that you want to grow. That's the hard thing to admit, isn't it? But it's an important thing to admit. Sometimes we end up spending so much time trying to fix what is showing up on the surface that we never deal what is happening underneath. Last week, I talked about this. We're always band-aiding things on the surface, but we're never getting to the root of the problem. And we try to fix the reaction, or we try to fix the habit, or we try to fix the emotion. We try to fix that part of our life that everyone else can see because we don't want them to think a certain way about us. But underneath all of those things that I just talked about, there is a root system. Something has been planted, and that something has been watered by over and over consistency of listening to that stuff. And then something is being fed long enough that it begins to produce fruit. Good fruit or bad fruit, depending on what you're planting. And if we only deal with the fruit itself, then we will begin to be frustrated because we're not dealing with the root system. Because you can cut fruit off a tree, but if the root is still alive, it's going to keep producing. So whether that is a rotten, a bad, a tree or a good tree, if we don't get to the root system, it's going to keep producing whatever it is that we keep planting. So instead of asking, why do I keep reacting this way? Maybe you need to ask yourself, why have I been feeding, or what have I been feeding that keeps producing the reaction? That's what I like to think about in my own life. I think about my thing is, trying to get my feelings better under control. I fail at this every single day at some point. So I have to ask myself, what am I feeding myself that allows me to keep reacting in a negative light? Well, one of the things that I'm not feeding myself enough of is God's word. Because the more that I'm in God's word, the more that I begin to act in a peaceful, loving, caring, compassionate way. So instead of only asking yourself, why do I feel so anxious? Maybe you need to ask yourself, why am I constantly putting, or what am I constantly putting in front of me that keeps feeding the anxiety? Instead of asking yourself, well, why do I feel so distracted all the time? I was just talking to somebody the other day about reading a book, and they said, it's very hard for me because I get distracted when I read a book. Well, maybe you need to ask yourself, what habits have you built that you're training your mind to where you're avoiding stillness? Because that's where awareness begins. Think about it. The reason why you have a hard time reading a book and the reason why your mind can't stay focused on what you're reading is because you have trained your mind to always be distracted by the things that we do. You sit and watch TV. Instead of watching TV, you're watching it and you're scrolling. So you're training your mind not to focus on one thing. You're distracted. That's where this awareness begins. Awareness is very powerful because once you see what is feeding the something in your life, you begin to make different decisions. You stop living on autopilot and you stop acting like everything has access to you that deserves access to you. You start paying attention. You start asking, what am I listening to every single day? What am I watching every single day? What voices am I allowing to influence me? What thoughts do I keep giving space to? What environments do I keep walking into, even though I know they pull me in the wrong direction? That friendship, right? That friend group at work, at school, wherever you are, you know it's not healthy, but you still insert yourself into the group. And then you wonder when you walk away why you think so badly. Again, this is not about becoming paranoid. It's about becoming intentional because your life is being formed, whether you're paying attention or not. And the question is whether you are going to participate. Is that formation? Are you going to participate in that formation or just let whatever is loudest begin to shape you? This is why your environment matters so much. Now, it's a lot easier for those of us here at the church that are in an environment that is mostly godly environment, but that does not mean that we still do not get distracted. It does not mean that we still don't think maybe negatively about what is going on or what other people think about us because of an experience or a circumstance that took place. But the environment does matter. And I think sometimes we underestimate the power of repeated exposure. We think, well, I know who I am. I know what I believe. I can be around this. I'm strong enough to be around this. I can listen to this stuff and I can take it and I won't let it affect me. Well, that might be true at first. And maybe you don't feel like it's affecting you. And it probably isn't in the very beginning. But repetition has a way of lowering resistance, which means the first time you hear something that is off, it bothers you. The second time you hear it, maybe it bothers you, but not as much. And after a while, if you keep hearing the same thing like that over and over and over, eventually you're going to stop noticing it. You're going to be numb to it. Let me give you an example. Just think about TV today. Think about the movies we watch. Back in the day, 50 years ago, they did not allow cussing on TV. Now, it's no big deal. And in the very beginning, you noticed it. But then, because you kept watching it, it got a little bit easier and it didn't become as noticeable. And then after years of watching it, now it's not even that it's one small little word, it's the bigger things now. Now it's sex, and now it's, just all the different things that we're dealing with. Gender ideology that you would never see on TV. And what's happened is the resistance has gotten lower and lower because we keep putting it in our minds and it's no big deal. We've gotten numb. It's like the proverbial frog, right? You put a live frog in a cold pan of water. You turn on the burner and that frog will get cooked before he realizes it. That's what we look like in life. So eventually, if you're not careful, what once felt wrong now starts to feel normal. And that is exactly how drift happens. Most people do not drift because they wake up one day and decide, well, I think I'm going to move in the wrong direction today. No, they don't do that. That's not how it usually works. Drift is so much quieter than that. It's a little decision here with a little decision there. Over time, ends up being way off course. And it happens when we keep feeding the wrong things little by little, allowing the wrong voices to shape our thinking. We make small compromises. We keep giving our attention to the things that pull us away from truth. And eventually, we look up and we realize that we are not where we thought we were. As a matter of fact, your friends might even say, man, you're not who you used to be. You used to be so different. Now, that could be in a good way and a bad way. And it's not because the one thing has destroyed us, but it's because we kept feeding something, a little of everything. And here's the thing. You do not drift into strength, all right? When you think about working out, I wish there was some magic thing that we could just drift into having strength when it comes to working out. Nobody accidentally becomes disciplined. Nobody accidentally becomes a strong mind or develops some kind of deep conviction. Nobody actually becomes a person of truth. You just don't drift into those things because what is easiest is usually not what strengthens you. What is easiest is usually what distracts you, what takes you away from what is really good. What is loudest is usually outrage. But what is most valuable or what is most available is usually not wisdom, right? Wisdom is not usually the most available thing. It's the loudest voice that creates the outrage. And if we are not intentional, we will naturally feed whatever is easiest, whatever is loudest, and whatever is most available. That is why you have to make a decision. Not a dramatic one, and not necessarily a big one, okay? You don't need some huge life overhaul, most likely. You just need to start small and keep working your way into that direction. It needs to be a real decision to start paying attention to what you are feeding. That's where it needs to start. And you know what? I think it starts with honesty. You got to be honest with yourself. What am I consistently allowing into my life? Not once in a while, not every now and then, but constantly. Like if you're a Christian and you have a friend group who are not Christians and you allow that friend group to be in your life every single day, you are going to drift eventually. You are not strong enough to be able to be in company that is not healthy because the Bible says bad company corrupts good morals. Those are facts. That is the truth. And so you got to ask yourself, what do I need to keep going back to? What do I reach for when I'm tired? What do I consume when I get stressed? And who do I listen to when I get discouraged? What thoughts do I entertain when nobody else is around? Those patterns that I just repeated to you, those questions, they matter because consistency is what produces growth. If I consistently eat better, I am going to become healthy as a human being. That doesn't mean I won't get sick. It doesn't mean that I can't have some terminally bad disease, but I have a lot less chance of it. Going to the gym consistently is going to make me also healthier. It's going to make me stronger. It's going to help me live longer. Those are the patterns we're looking for. And once you see what has been feeding the wrong things, you have to be willing to remove some of it. I don't think a lot of people are willing to do that. I think it's too hard for so many people. And I think it's hard because they keep allowing the wrong voices in their mind. I'm telling you, if you're around a person that is super healthy, they eat healthy, they work out, and they talk about it all the time, and you're around that person all the time, that is eventually going to wear on you to where you are going to want to begin to be healthy as well. I know this for a fact because it's in my own life. The people around me, most of them, not all of them, but the majority of them are all kind of doing what I'm doing when it comes to my health. In some way, shape, or form. They're at least, they're being aware of it. They're acknowledging it. They're making steps to do it. Some of them haven't fully went into it yet, but they are asking questions. They're researching. They're buying vitamins. They're asking me what vitamins to take. They're asking me what food I eat, because I think a lot of times they hear how I feel. They see the results of what has gone on. And I'm just talking in the health world because that was a big one for me. But it also goes in the same way spiritually. It goes in the same way financially and mentally and relationally, all the different areas that I love to talk about. It affects every single area. And I know that it sounds simple, but it is not always easy, because if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. Everybody would be in shape. Everybody would be in church. Everybody would be out of financial debt. Everybody would not have to go to a counselor because they are mentally strong. I could go on and on. It doesn't happen because it's not always easy. It takes work. And sometimes the things feeding the wrong parts of us are the things that we enjoy. And those things are familiar, and they're connected to people that we like. And they become a part of our life, a part of our routine. But not everything that feels normal is healthy. Everything you have access to should have access to you. There are some things in your life that do not need to be managed. They need to be removed. I'm going to let that sink in for a minute. Some things in your life do not need to be managed. They need to be removed. The voices do not need a smaller place in your life. They don't need a place in your life. Some of those habits, they don't need to be justified. They need to be cut out. The environments that I'm talking about, they don't need another chance to influence you in a positive way. You already know what those environments do to you. And I say this carefully because it's not about being extreme. It's really about being honest. And if you want the change in your life, you want to have the disciplines in your life and all the blessings that God talks about in His Word, then you got to think about these things. And if something consistently produces confusion in your life, then why do you keep feeding it? If something consistently pulls you into comparison, then why do you keep giving that thing space? If something consistently weakens your conviction, then why do you keep treating it like it's harmless? You cannot keep feeding what is hurting you and then be surprised when it keeps growing in the wrong direction. Removal is only part of it, by the way. You can't just remove something and leave the space empty. You got to fill it with something else. I mean, you think about the addict. A person who is addicted to things, they remove the thing they're addicted to and they replace it with something else. And at least the people in our church, they usually replace it with things that are positive, working out. Maybe it's the Word of God. Maybe it's serving. And so what they do, they're so addicted because they have an addicted personality. They get rid of the bad thing. They replace it with something good, but then they're addicted to the good, which is not always bad because at least it's good. I have a few relatives. They come out of addiction. Now they're really big into church and the Lord, and now they are just addicted to God, addicted to the church, addicted to helping people and loving on people. And sometimes it can feel overboard because that's what addiction does. It's always overboard. But at least it's overboard in the right thing. Bottom line is you got to replace whatever it is that you get rid of with something. You replace the noise with truth. You replace the constant distraction with moments of stillness. You replace voices that pull you toward compromise with voices that call you higher. They challenge you. You replace content that feeds anxiety with things that build your perspective. You replace habits that keep you stuck with rhythms that help you grow. And no, it may not feel natural right away, and that's okay. Because growth usually feels uncomfortable at first because you are training yourself to feed it something different. If you have spent a long time feeding distraction, stillness is going to feel strange. If you spend a long time feeding negativity, gratitude may feel unnatural. It feels weird to talk about. If you've spent a lot of time feeding an insecurity, then the truth may feel hard to believe at first that you were fearfully, wonderfully made, that God does have a plan for you to prosper you and not to harm you. But keep feeding it. You faith it till you make it, because over time, what you feed begins to grow. And eventually your thinking starts to shift. Your reactions, guess what? They shift. Your perspective, what does it do? It shifts. You begin to notice the things that used to pull you in do not have the same power over you. The thoughts that used to dominate your mind do not get the same amount of space now. And those voices that used to shape you do not carry the same weight anymore. Not because everything around you overnight changed. No, it's because you started feeding change. And that is the part I do not want you to miss. This is not an instant thing. This is not one moment, one decision. All right? It's not one good decision that's going to change it all and everything's fixed. No, it's consistency in the small things. The same way that unhealthy things grow when they are fed consistently. Well, guess what? Healthy things grow when they are fed consistently. So do not get discouraged if you make one change and you don't feel anything different immediately. I want you to keep going. I want you to keep feeding your truth, not your truth, the truth. I want you to keep feeding yourself with clarity. I want you to keep feeding yourself the discipline and keep feeding what is actually going to produce the life that you say you want, because what you feed today is shaping what grows tomorrow. I cannot say that enough. I cannot repeat that enough to you right now. So as I wrap this up, I want you to sit with this question this week. What have you been feeding that you are now frustrated is growing? That might be uncomfortable, but it's necessary in order for change to happen. And then ask yourself, what do I need to start feeding if I want my life to move in a different direction? Because change does not begin with pretending nothing is wrong. It begins when you are honest about what has been getting your attention. What you feed grows, so choose wisely. Pay attention to what you are allowing in your mind, what you're allowing in your heart, and what you're allowing in your conversations, and what you're allowing into your environment. Because what gets in today has a way of showing up tomorrow. And the good news is you are not powerless. You can choose what gets access. You can choose what gets fed. You get to choose the voices that shape you, and you get to choose to stop feeding what is weakening you and start feeding what is going to strengthen you. That's how growth begins. Not with a perfect life, not with everything figured out, but with intentional choices made consistently. Now, if this episode has helped you in any way, shape, or form, I want you to share it with someone who needs to hear it. Share, share, share. Tag a person. Subscribe. Please subscribe to this channel. I want this YouTube podcast to grow as much as possible, and I don't want you missing out on what's coming next. Why? Because I'm just getting started. And remember, truth still matters even when culture says it does not. We'll see you next time.